All right, how do you solve a problem that looks like this? So this is a quadratic, and you can tell it's a quadratic because the highest power on the x is x squared. And so whenever that is the case, you need to factor. And before you factor, you need to get the one side of the equation equal to 0. So if we start with example A here, we see we already have that. The right side of the equation already equals 0. So we're ready to factor. And this is really the most common type of factoring that everybody always forgets about, is what is in both of those terms that you can pull out to the front. And there's an x in both of those terms. So you can pull an x out to the front like this. You take away an x from the x squared, you're just left with an x. You take away an x from the 6x, you're just left with the 6. And then now once you're factored, you do a very important thing. So look at what we have. We have two things that are multiplied together to get 0. And so think about that for a second. And how does that happen? Well, if two numbers multiplied together to get 0, one of them has to be 0. So that's how we proceed with this. We say either x equals 0 or x plus 6 equals 0. And that's going to give us two more equations. That's going to give us two solutions. For a quadratic, we generally expect there to be two solutions. So you see we have x equals 0. That's one solution already. And then subtract 6 from both sides. And there's our other solution. So with quadratics, there's generally two solutions. You can tell by how many solutions there are by the highest exponent on the x. So quadratic, it's an x squared. So we expect two solutions. And that should be the same for the one on the right. You might think there's something we could do other than factoring, but there's really not. The way to do it is to get everything to the same side. So we're going to move everything to the left here. Generally, we try to keep the x squared term positive, just because we're kind of just more used to that. And then now we got to factor. So factoring should probably be a whole nother video on itself. But let's quickly do how I factor these. So the way that I factor this is called the Richmond method. And what you do in the Richmond method is it's a multi-step process. So first, you got to take the number, the a coefficient, and multiply it by the -3. And that's going to get us x squared minus x minus 6. And then now we're going to factor that equation. So that's going to end up being x minus 3, x plus 2. And then the last step of the Richmond method is you got to come back and you got to divide these numbers by the thing that you multiplied by in the first place, by that a coefficient. So the 2 in this case. And then when we're here, you got to simplify whatever fractions you can. So here, 2 over 2, simplify that to x plus 1. And then when you cannot simplify the fraction, you got to take whatever that denominator is and move it to the front to become this coefficient, 2x minus 3. And then now it's factored. That's how you can factor this using the Richmond method. And now you do the same thing we did before. We got two things multiplied together to get 0. So we're going to set them both equal to 0. 2x minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 1 equals 0. And then we solve both of those equations. This one's easy, x equals -1. This one's also pretty easy, x equals 3/2. And there's the two solutions for that quadratic. But that's generally what you do when you have a quadratic. Whenever you have an x squared term, you got to get everything to the same side so you can factor and then get your solutions.